The church fell silent the moment the veiled bride entered. 200 members of London's highest society turned as one, their whispers dissolving beneath the solemn swell of the organ. This was meant to be the wedding of the season. The feared, Duke of Dunor, and the golden beauty everyone adored. Yet beneath the thick cascade of Brussels lace, the woman walking toward the altar could barely breathe. Rowena Holbrook knew one thing with dreadful certainty. When the Duke discovered the truth, her life would end in ruin, perhaps worse, because the man waiting at the altar was known throughout England for a single terrifying talent. He destroyed those who deceived him, and Rowena had just vowed to deceive him forever. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Walk slowly, do not speak unless the priest commands it. And above all, do not let him see your face. Rowena's gloved hands trembled as she took another step down the long aisle of St. George's, Hanover Square. Candles glittered in crystal chandeliers above. Silk gowns rustled like whispers of judgment. They were all here, earls, viscounts, ladies who had spent years praising Rowena's younger sister while pretending Rowena herself did not exist. They had come to see Clarissa Holbrook marry the most powerful man in England. Instead, they were watching the wrong sister, hidden behind lace, sold in her place. Rowena dared one glance toward the altar. The Duke stood motionless, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black so severe it looked almost like mourning. His hair was dark, touched faintly with silver at the temples, and his gaze, those cold, storm-gray eyes, rested directly on her. Even through the veil, she felt it, that gaze, sharp, patient, dangerous. He watched her the way a hawk watches a field mouse, and suddenly Rowena was certain. He knows. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. He must see the deception, the wrong posture, the wrong walk. Clarissa moved with effortless brightness. Rowena had always moved carefully, as if apologizing for occupying space. Surely he noticed. Surely he would stop the ceremony. Surely, but he did not. He simply waited. When she reached the altar, her father placed her trembling hand into the Duke's. Lord Holbrook did not meet her eyes. He had not looked at her once since morning. His voice shook as he muttered the formal words of presentation. Then he stepped back and left her there, alone beside the most feared man in England. The Duke's hand closed around hers. Warm, strong, possessive. Rowena felt the pressure of his gloved fingers and nearly lost the courage to stand. He did not release her, not once. The priest began speaking, but Rowena heard very little of it. Her world had narrowed to the man beside her. His presence was overwhelming, not merely powerful, controlled, as if beneath that still exterior lived something immense and carefully restrained. Every few seconds she felt his gaze move across her face, studying the lace veil that hid her identity. Does he know? The thought repeated endlessly. Does he know? When the priest finally turned toward her, Rowena felt her throat close. Do you, Clarissa Ann Holbrook, and take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? For one terrible second she almost spoke the truth, almost confessed everything. Her mother's cruelty, her sister's elopement, the deception that had delivered her here. But she imagined her mother's cold smile waiting somewhere in the crowd, imagined the family disgrace, imagined the Duke's fury. And so Rowena Holbrook did the only thing she had ever been trained to do. She sacrificed herself quietly. I do. The words fell like a stone into still water, a ripple that could never be undone. The priest turned to the Duke. And do you, Ambrose Carrington, Duke of Dunor, take this woman to be your lawful wife? Rowena finally dared glance toward him. His expression was unreadable, but those gray eyes, they burned through the veil, as if he could see everything, every lie, every fear, every trembling thought in her mind. I do. His voice was deep and calm. Certain. The priest raised his hands. Then by the authority vested in me. The final words passed in a blur. Applause followed. Society sighed in satisfaction. The marriage of the season had been sealed. But as the Duke turned slightly toward her, his thumb brushed slowly over her gloved knuckles. The touch was deliberate, claiming, and when he leaned closer, his voice was so quiet only she could hear it. Do not tremble so, my Duchess. Rowena froze. The title sounded wrong. Terrifying. You will need your strength, he added softly. A strange shiver ran down her spine, because there was something in his tone that did not sound like anger or suspicion. It sounded like anticipation. And Rowena suddenly realized something far more frightening than his wrath. The Duke of Dunor did not seem surprised by his bride at all. The wedding breakfast glittered with laughter. Crystal glasses chimed beneath the chandeliers. and London's most powerful families leaned toward one another with eager curiosity. They were watching the new Duchess of Dunori, or rather, they were trying to. Rowena still wore the veil. Lady Holbrook had explained it smoothly to the guests. A charming old tradition, her mother had said with a gracious smile. The bride's modesty preserved until she reaches her husband's home. No one questioned it. After all, aristocratic customs were often strange. But beneath the lace, Rowena felt as though she were suffocating. She sat beside her husband at the head of the long table, surrounded by 200 witnesses to a lie that would soon unravel. Yet the Duke behaved as though nothing were wrong. He barely spoke. He acknowledged toasts with brief nods. He ignored most attempts at conversation. But one thing he did constantly. He watched her. Rowena felt his gaze through the lace as clearly as if his fingers were touching her skin. Every time she lifted a glass, every time she shifted in her seat, every time her hand trembled beside his, and sometimes too often his hand brushed hers. Passing a plate, steadying her elbow, adjusting the position of a glass. Each contact sent a strange shock through her body. Not fear, something warmer, something far more confusing. "You have not eaten." The quiet words startled her. They were the first he had spoken directly to her since the ceremony. Rowena turned slightly toward him. "I am not hungry, Your Grace." A pause, then his voice lowered. "You will need your strength." The meaning struck her instantly. The wedding night, the unveiling, the moment when he would see her face and discover the truth. Her stomach twisted. "Your Grace," she said carefully. "Perhaps we might remain in London tonight. The day has been long." No. The single word ended the matter. His tone was calm, absolute. "My carriage is already prepared," he continued. "We leave within the hour." The words fell like a sentence. Dunor Park lay 4 hours away. 4 hours until the veil came off. 4 hours until her life was destroyed. The carriage waiting outside was a masterpiece of wealth. Black lacquered wood, gold trim gleaming in the pale afternoon light. 4 perfectly matched gray horses pawed the ground impatiently. Rowena climbed inside with stiff legs. The interior glowed softly with velvet seats and brass lanterns. Opposite her, the Duke settled back into the shadows. The carriage lurched forward. London began to fade behind them. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence grew heavy, uncomfortable. Rowena clasped her gloved hands tightly in her lap. She could feel his eyes on her again, studying, observing, waiting. Finally, he spoke. "You are afraid of me." Her head snapped up. "Your Grace?" "You sit as far away as possible," he said calmly. "You have not spoken since we entered the carriage. Your hands are shaking." A pause. "You are afraid?" Rowena forced her voice steady. "I am merely tired." "You are lying." The bluntness struck like a slap. Rowena's breath caught. "I have spent my life dealing with liars," the Duke continued quietly. "In business, in politics, and in society." He leaned forward slightly. The lantern light revealed his eyes clearly now. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. "The nervous ones speak too much," he said. "The confident ones speak too little." His gaze swept over her. "But you are careful." Her pulse pounded painfully. "I do not understand what you mean." "Oh, I believe you do." He studied her hands. "Your left hand keeps clenching," he observed calmly. "Your breathing is controlled as though you are trying not to panic." Rowena's mouth went dry. "You have also avoided looking directly at me since the carriage left the church." Another pause. Then he said something that made her blood turn cold. "You behave like someone hiding something." Her heart nearly stopped. "I assure you, Your Grace. You may also," he continued thoughtfully, "simply fear your wedding night." His tone softened slightly, as many innocent brides do. Rowena swallowed. "Yes," she said quietly. "That must be it." But he did not look convinced. Instead, he leaned back slowly, watching her as if she were a puzzle he was enjoying. "There is another possibility," he said. Her fingers tightened in her lap. "What possibility?" "That you are someone other than who you claim to be." The words struck like thunder. Rowena's lungs forgot how to breathe. He watched her reaction carefully. Then very slowly, he extended his hand toward her veil. "Remove it." Her entire body froze. "Your Grace, I wish to see my wife's face." Her heart slammed violently. If the veil lifted now, everything would end. "Please," she whispered. The word escaped before she could stop it. The Duke's hand paused. "Please," she repeated, her voice trembling. "Wait until we reach your estate." His eyes narrowed. "You beg me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if he saw her now, the carriage might turn around. She might be cast out onto the road, or worse, but she could not say that, so she whispered the only truth she dared reveal. I am frightened. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, his hand lowered. Very well. Relief crashed through her so suddenly she almost collapsed. You may keep your veil, he said calmly. But I want something in return. Anything, she breathed. A faint, dangerous smile touched his mouth. Careful with such promises, wife. He extended his gloved hand. Come sit beside me. Rowena blinked. My hand, he clarified. You will sit beside me for the remainder of the journey, and allow me to hold it. The request seemed absurdly small, yet something in his tone made it clear. This was not a request. Slowly she rose. The carriage swayed as she crossed the narrow space. When she sat beside him, he took her hand. His fingers closed firmly around hers. Warm, steady, possessive, and suddenly Rowena understood. The Duke of Dunor had no intention of letting her escape. For the next 3 hours, the Duke did not release her hand. The carriage rolled steadily through the winter countryside while dusk slowly swallowed the sky. Rowena sat beside him, every nerve painfully aware of his presence. Their gloved hands remained clasped together, not gently, not loosely, firmly, as if he had claimed something that belonged to him, and intended to keep it. The silence between them should have been unbearable, yet it was strangely calm. The Duke did not question her again. He did not attempt to lift her veil. He simply sat beside her, watching the darkening countryside beyond the carriage window. But every now and then, his thumb moved slowly across the back of her hand. A quiet gesture, almost absent-minded. The touch sent strange warmth through her chest. It made no sense. This man was supposed to hate her. When he discovered the truth, he would despise her. Yet he held her hand as though the contact mattered. As though she mattered. Rowena tried not to think about it. Outside, the final lights of London disappeared. Fields stretched wide and silver beneath the fading evening. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the carriage slowed. The Duke spoke without looking at her. We have arrived. Rowena's breath caught. Dunor Park. Her prison. Or her execution ground. The carriage stopped before enormous iron gates. Beyond them stretched a vast estate, lit by dozens of glowing lanterns. When the gates opened, the carriage rolled forward along a long drive lined with ancient oak trees. And then Rowena saw it. Dunor Park rose from the mist like a palace, a massive gray stone manor with tall windows blazing with golden light. The house seemed endless, wing after wing stretching into the darkness. Servants waited at the grand entrance in neat rows. Footmen, maids, household staff, all prepared to greet their new duchess. Rowena's stomach twisted. They believe I am Clarissa. The carriage door opened. The Duke stepped down first. Then he turned and offered his hand. Rowena hesitated, but his gaze left her no choice. She placed her hand in his. He helped her down carefully. His grip was warm and steady at her waist as her feet touched the gravel. Welcome home, he said quietly. Home. The word felt impossibly strange. Inside, the entrance hall soared upward into shadowed ceilings. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls. Candlelight flickered across polished marble floors. The scent of beeswax and old wood filled the air. Rowena had never seen wealth like this. A stern-faced woman in black stepped forward. Your Grace? The Duke nodded. Mrs. Blackwood, see that the Duchess's rooms are prepared. The woman bowed respectfully. Of course, Your Grace. Then the Duke added something unexpected. And send my valet with the key to the East Wing. The housekeeper froze briefly. The East Wing, Your Grace. You heard me. Something passed between them, surprise quickly hidden. Yes, Your Grace. The Duke's hand tightened slightly around Rowena's arm. Come, he said. There is something I wish to show you before the veil comes off. Her heart began pounding again. He led her through the manor, down long corridors, up a sweeping staircase, past rooms lit warmly with firelight. A music room, a vast library, a gallery filled with priceless paintings. Rowena could barely take it all in. Finally, they stopped before a large door. Locked. The Duke produced a key. The heavy lock clicked open. This room, he said quietly, has remained closed for 3 years. Rowena frowned beneath the veil. 3 years? The door creaked open. Candlelight flickered inside. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. The walls were covered. Every surface, every table, every shelf. Paintings, sketches, miniatures, portraits. Dozens, perhaps hundreds. All of them depicting the same woman. Brown hair, serious eyes, a face society had always called plain. Rowena stepped forward slowly. Her heart stopped, because the woman in every painting was her. Her breath left her in a whisper. What? Behind her, the Duke's voice was low. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I attended a ball at the Harrington townhouse. Rowena remembered it instantly, a miserable evening. She had spent most of it alone by a window, trying not to cry while her sister dazzled the room. I saw you there, he continued, sitting in the corner with a book while the entire ballroom worshipped your sister. His voice softened. You looked peaceful. Rowena's mind spun. He stepped closer. I learned your name that night. She turned slowly toward him. His gray eyes burned in the candlelight. Rowena Holbrook. Her breath caught. But my sister? I never wanted your sister. The words fell heavily into the room. I wanted you. Rowena stared at him in stunned silence. I had my agents learn everything about you, he continued calmly. Your kindness, your patience, your intelligence. His gaze softened slightly. And the cruelty your family showed you. He gestured toward the portraits. I commissioned these over the past 3 years. Her voice trembled. You watched me? I studied you. He stepped closer. And I waited. Rowena's heart pounded wildly. Why? His answer came without hesitation. Because I knew your mother would never willingly give you to me. Understanding crashed through her. The contract? Yes. His eyes darkened. I contracted for a Holbrook daughter. Her breath caught. You expected this? I hoped for it. The room seemed to spin. All this time, all this planning. You knew I wasn't Clarissa, she whispered. I knew the moment you stepped out of the carriage at the church. He reached for the veil. This time she did not stop him. The lace lifted slowly. Cool air brushed her face. For the first time that day, Rowena saw him clearly. He looked down at her, and the cold, terrifying Duke of Denor suddenly looked something else entirely, relieved. There you are, he whispered. Finally. Rowena stared at him as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. You knew? Her voice barely carried across the candlelit room. The Duke of Denor did not look away. I knew, he said simply. The quiet certainty of his tone was more shocking than anger would have been. For hours she had waited for fury, for humiliation, for the terrible cold wrath he was famous for. Instead, he looked almost satisfied. Rowena stepped back instinctively. You allowed it, she whispered. You allowed the wedding to happen. Yes. But why? The word escaped her in a fragile breath. If you knew I was not Clarissa, why did you not stop the ceremony? His answer came without hesitation. Because I was marrying the woman I wanted. Rowena shook her head slowly. No, that cannot be true. He moved closer, the candlelight sharpening the hard angles of his face. It is. You could have had anyone, she insisted. Princesses, ladies far more beautiful than I am. Something dark flickered across his expression. Beauty, he said quietly, is the least interesting quality a woman can possess. She laughed softly, not with amusement, with disbelief. You say that now, but society has spent my entire life reminding me that beauty is the only quality that matters. Society is often wrong. His voice lowered. You think I chose you because I lacked better options? Rowena hesitated. Yes. The honesty hung painfully in the air. For a moment, Ambrose Carrington looked almost wounded. I have waited 3 years for you. His words were calm, but something dangerous pulsed beneath them. 3 years watching you sit quietly at the edges of ballrooms while men chased women who glittered louder. He gestured toward the portraits surrounding them. 3 years collecting every glimpse I could of you. Her heart pounded. That is not romantic, she whispered. That is an obsession. Yes. The word came easily, without shame. I have been accused of worse things. He stepped closer again, but this time he stopped a respectful distance away. You fascinated me from the beginning. Why? Rowena's voice cracked slightly. I am plain. You are not. I am. She lifted her chin stubbornly. I have been compared to my sister my entire life. Then your family is blind. His gaze softened. I saw a woman who sat alone without begging for attention. A woman who treated servants with more kindness than society ladies. A woman who read books during balls instead of pretending to enjoy them. A faint smile touched his mouth. You were the only interesting person in the room. Rowena felt heat rise unexpectedly in her cheeks. You built an entire plan just to marry me? Yes. And if my sister had not run away? Something colder appeared in his eyes. I would have solved the problem. She studied him carefully. You are a frightening man, Your Grace. I am aware. Silence stretched between them. The room full of portraits seemed to watch. Finally, Rowena spoke again. You understand that I deceived you? Yes. You understand that my mother used me like a bargaining piece.
Yes.
You understand that I expected you to hate me when you discovered the truth. At that, Ambrose's expression changed. Something gentler flickered beneath the steel. Rowena, he said quietly, you have spent your entire life expecting cruelty. His voice dropped lower. But I am not your mother. Her breath caught. You do not own me, she said suddenly. The word surprised even her. He tilted his head slightly. Legally, I do. Yes, she said. But I will not live as someone's possession. The Duke studied her with quiet intensity. What would you prefer? The question startled her. Prefer?
Yes.
He gestured around the room. You are the Duchess of Denor now. You may define your own place here. She hesitated, then said the words that had been building inside her all day. I want my own chambers. His answer came immediately. Done. And time before we consummate the marriage. A flicker of tension crossed his jaw. How much time? A fortnight. He considered that, then nodded once. I have waited 3 years. 14 days will not kill me. Relief rushed through her. And I want to learn, she continued carefully, to understand how your estate works. Your finances. Your land. I do not wish to exist here merely as decoration. The Duke's brows lifted slightly. You wish to manage Dunor? I wish to be useful. For the first time that evening, genuine surprise appeared in his eyes. Then slowly, he smiled. A practical duchess. His voice held something close to admiration. I should like that. Rowena studied him cautiously. You agree? To everything. He paused. But I have one condition. What? Dinner? She blinked. Dinner? Every evening. His gray gaze held hers steadily. You will dine with me. We will talk. I wish to know the woman I married. Rowena hesitated. The request seemed harmless, yet strangely intimate. Very well, she said quietly. Dinner? Something eased in his expression. Then he stepped aside and opened the door. Your chambers are prepared. As she passed him, his voice followed softly. And Rowena? She turned. You are never plain. His eyes moved briefly toward the walls covered in her portraits. You were simply overlooked. The first week at Dunor Park and felt like stepping into someone else's life. Rowena woke each morning in rooms larger than the entire upper floor of her childhood home. Tall windows overlooked endless winter gardens. Servants moved quietly through the halls with respectful bows whenever she passed. And every day she reminded herself of one important truth. This place did not belong to the frightened girl her mother had raised. It belonged to the Duchess of Denor. The first person to test that new identity was the housekeeper. Mrs. Blackwood had served the Carrington family for 30 years, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen generations come and go. On Rowena's second morning, the woman brought ledgers for the household accounts. Rowena studied them carefully. How many servants are currently employed here, she asked. Mrs. Blackwood blinked slightly. 62, Your Grace. And the weekly cost of provisions? Another pause. Your Grace, as such matters are usually handled by the staff. I would still like to understand them. The housekeeper studied her for a long moment. Something cautious shifted behind the woman's eyes. As you wish, Your Grace. That afternoon, Rowena met the estate manager. Mr. Thorne expected polite small talk. Instead, he found himself answering detailed questions about crop rotations, tenant cottages, and winter grain storage. By evening, he was laughing openly. Your Grace, he said as they returned to the house, you have the mind of an estate steward. Rowena smiled faintly. I was raised by a woman who believed I was good for nothing. Mr. Thorne looked surprised. Well, he said thoughtfully, she appears to have been mistaken. Each evening, Rowena kept her promise. Dinner with the Duke, always in a smaller private dining room, never the grand hall. At first the conversations were cautious, polite, formal. But slowly they changed. On the third evening he noticed the book she carried. You read poetry?
Yes.
Read something aloud. She hesitated. You truly wish that?
Yes.
So Rowena read. Her voice was soft at first, then steadier. The words filled the quiet room while candlelight flickered between them. When she finished, the Duke had not moved. Another, he said simply. From that night forward, she read to him often. Sometimes poetry, sometimes novels, sometimes letters written centuries earlier by people long dead. And every time she finished reading, he watched her, as if the sound of her voice was something precious. On the fifth evening, something unexpected happened. He read to her, a passage from philosophy. His voice was rougher than hers, less practiced. Yet the deep resonance of it made the words feel powerful. When he finished, Rowena looked at him with quiet surprise. You read philosophy? I read everything. He leaned back slightly. But poetry has always been difficult. Why? It requires vulnerability. She studied him. And yet you listen to me read it. His gaze held hers. I listen because it is you. Her heart stumbled strangely at those words. By the 7th evening, the dinners felt almost comfortable. They spoke about politics, books, childhood memories, even small things like the stubborn behavior of Dunoir's sheep in winter. But that night something changed. Rowena had finished reading when she noticed the Duke studying her unusually closely. What are you thinking? She asked. That you have accomplished more in 1 week than most estate managers manage in a year. She laughed softly. I have had excellent teachers. You have had reluctant teachers who became enthusiastic because of you. Her cheeks warmed slightly. I merely asked questions. You asked the correct questions. A quiet pause followed. Then she said something she had not meant to say aloud. The woman in those portraits looks different than the woman I see in the mirror. His gaze sharpened. How so? She looks like someone worth painting. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. Worth wanting. The room fell silent. Slowly he stood. Come here. Rowena hesitated, but she obeyed. She stopped beside his chair. Closer. Her breath caught. She stepped forward. Then he said something unexpected. Kneel. The word startled her, yet his expression held no cruelty, only intensity. Trust me. Slowly she lowered herself onto the carpet. Looking up at him, the Duke leaned forward. His hands came to rest gently against her face. Warm, steady. You are worth everything, he said quietly. His voice had lost its usual control. You are worth the 3 years I spent waiting. His thumbs brushed lightly across her cheeks. And the man who made you believe otherwise deserves to answer for it. Rowena froze. You mean my mother?
Yes.
His expression hardened. I have destroyed men for less than what she did to you. Fear flickered through her chest. She is still my mother. She is a woman who spent 23 years breaking you. His voice lowered dangerously. And I intend to ensure she never harms you again. Rowena whispered his name before she could stop herself. Ambrose. The sound of it seemed to affect him. His gaze softened, but the promise behind his words remained. And Rowena realized something unsettling. The feared Duke of Dunoir was not merely her husband, he was also her fiercest protector. The house party began 3 months later. Dunoir Park filled with carriages, laughter, and the rustle of silk gowns as 30 of England's most powerful families arrived for a fortnight of politics, alliances, and quiet rivalries. Rowena stood beside her husband in the great entrance hall as the first guests entered. Her spine was straight, her smile calm. Inside, however, her nerves fluttered like trapped birds. This would be the first time society saw the crying new Duchess of Dunoir clearly, not the veiled bride, not the rumor whispered in drawing rooms. The real woman. Ambrose leaned slightly toward her. Breathe. She glanced sideways. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back. They will adore you, he murmured. And if they do not? His expression did not change. Then I will destroy them. The words were delivered so calmly that Rowena nearly laughed. For the first 2 days, everything went perfectly. Rowena welcomed guests with grace. She remembered names, listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions. By the end of the 2nd evening, even the sharp-tongued Countess of Marchman had admitted grudgingly, the Duke has married well. Ambrose watched it all with quiet pride, but not everyone admired her. On the 3rd afternoon, Lord Bartholomew Wrexham arrived, tall, golden-haired, charming in the way of men who knew exactly how attractive they were. When he bowed over Rowena's hand, his lips lingered slightly too long above her glove. The mysterious Duchess of Dunoir, he said smoothly. I confess I expected someone more conventional. Rowena withdrew her hand politely. And yet here I am, my lord. His eyes glinted with interest. Indeed. The conversation was harmless enough, yet something about his smile unsettled her. That night she mentioned it to Ambrose while they prepared for dinner. Wrexham has always been too bold, Ambrose said quietly. Should I be concerned? His jaw tightened slightly. Only vigilant. 5 days into the house party, the trouble began. Rowena had retreated briefly to the library to review household accounts when she heard voices in the corridor outside. One belonged unmistakably to Wrexham. The other was Lady Peyton, known throughout London for her love of gossip. I cannot imagine what Dunoir sees in her, Lady Peyton said lightly. She is so plain. Rowena's fingers tightened on the ledger. She is certainly not what society expected, Rexam replied. But perhaps that is precisely the point. You believe he married her out of convenience? Rexam chuckled softly. My dear lady, men like Dunor do not marry for love. Rowena felt a cold sensation spread through her chest. They marry for practicality. A plain wife from a desperate family, Rexam continued smoothly, is a wife who will never question her husband. Lady Peyton laughed. How convenient. Very convenient, Rexam said. And when a husband inevitably seeks more stimulating company elsewhere, such a wife will simply remain grateful she was chosen at all. The word struck deep. Rowena knew they were lies. She knew Ambrose had waited 3 years for her, yet the voice of her mother whispered cruelly inside her mind. Plain. Unwanted. Lucky anyone married you at all. She must know it too, Rexam added. A woman like that cannot truly believe a man like Dunor loves her. Footsteps faded down the corridor. Rowena sat frozen. Her chest felt tight. The poison had worked, even though she knew better, even though she had lived 3 months of kindness and patience and quiet devotion. The old doubt stirred again. That evening at dinner, she watched Ambrose carefully. Lady Marchman leaned toward him, laughing softly at something he said. Her hand brushed his sleeve. The moment was harmless. Yet suddenly Rowena saw it differently. What if Rexam is right? Later that night, Rowena slipped outside onto the terrace for air. The gardens glowed silver beneath the moon, but she was not alone. Your Grace? Rexam stepped from the shadows. Rowena stiffened. I was hoping to speak with you. I was seeking solitude, my lord. Then I shall keep you company. He stepped closer. Tell me honestly, and are you happy here? Rowena lifted her chin. My happiness is none of your concern. I merely dislike seeing a woman deceived. His voice softened conspiratorially. You cannot truly believe Dunor married you for love. She felt anger rise. You presume too much. Do I? He leaned closer. I have known men like him my entire life. Men who collect things. Estates, titles. His gaze lingered on her face. And wives. Before she could step away, his fingers brushed her cheek. You deserve better than being convenient. Rowena slapped his hand aside. Do not touch me. Forgive me, he said smoothly. But when you finally realize the truth about your marriage, his smile deepened. I would be very interested to comfort you. Get away from her. The voice cut through the night like ice. Rowena turned. Ambrose stood a few steps away. His expression was utterly cold. Deadly. Dunor, Rexam said carefully. I was merely... I know exactly what you were doing. Ambrose moved forward, placing himself between them. You will leave my estate at first light tomorrow? Rexam paled. You cannot mean... I do. Ambrose's voice dropped lower. And if you ever stand within 10 feet of my wife again... The silence that followed was far more frightening than shouting. I will ruin you. Rexam left without another word. When the terrace fell quiet again, Ambrose turned slowly toward Rowena. His eyes were no longer furious. They were wounded. You listened to him. The accusation cut deeper than Rexam's insults. You believed him? Rowena's voice trembled. I have spent 23 years being told I am worthless. Tears burned her eyes. I cannot erase that in 3 months. The anger drained from Ambrose's face. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. I thought loving you would be enough to silence those voices. She held him tightly. It will take time. Then we will take time, he said. As long as it takes. The house party ended 2 days early. Officially, Ambrose claimed urgent political business required the guests to depart. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. Lord Wrexham had been dismissed at dawn. No one doubted why. The Duke of Dunor had made his warning unmistakably clear, and no guest wished to test it. When the final carriage rolled down the long gravel drive, silence returned to Dunor Park. Rowena stood beside the tall windows of the drawing room, watching the fading dust of wheels. She felt exhausted. The past week had stirred wounds she had believed were finally healing. Soft footsteps sounded behind her. Ambrose. His arm slipped gently around her waist. You were magnificent, he murmured. She gave a faint smile. I nearly believed Wrexham. He rested his chin lightly against her shoulder. I know. You were not angry? I was furious, he admitted quietly. But not with you. His hand tightened slightly around hers. I was angry with myself. She turned toward him. Why? Because I thought loving you would erase 23 years of cruelty. His gray eyes softened. I underestimated how deep those wounds go. Rowena studied his face. For the first time since she had met him, the feared Duke looked uncertain. "I'm trying," she said softly. "I know." He kissed her forehead. "And I will keep proving it." 2 days later, Mrs. Blackwood appeared at Rowena's sitting room door. "Your Grace, and there is a visitor. I am not receiving anyone today. I believe you will wish to receive this one." Rowena frowned. "Who is it?" The housekeeper hesitated. "Your mother." The words struck like cold water. Lady Elizabeth Holbrook stood in the drawing room when Rowena entered. But the woman before her looked nothing like the elegant matriarch she remembered. Her gown was worn, her posture bent, and the proud cruelty in her eyes had been replaced with something fragile. Desperation. "Rowena," her mother whispered. "Lady Holbrook," Rowena replied coolly. Silence stretched between them. Then Lady Elizabeth began to cry. "Everything is gone," she said hoarsely. "Your father's business collapsed. Our debts were called in. The house, the servants, everything." Rowena felt strangely empty listening to her. "You sold me to save it," she said quietly. "I know," her mother sobbed. "I know what I did. I deserve your hatred. But I have nowhere left to go." Rowena studied the woman who had once ruled her life with cold hands and sharper words. Once those tears would have shattered her. Now they barely stirred anything. "You came for money."
Yes.
"I have nothing else." The room fell silent. Rowena walked slowly to the window, looking out across the gardens she had grown to love. For 23 years this woman had defined her worth. Every insult, every slap, every comparison to Clarissa. Yet now, that power was gone. "I will not restore your life," Rowena said calmly. Her mother's shoulders sagged. "But I will not let you starve." Lady Elizabeth looked up in shock. "I will arrange modest lodgings and a small allowance." Rowena turned to face her. "But you will never contact me again. You will live quietly. And every day you will remember that the daughter you called worthless is the only reason you survived." Her mother collapsed into tears. "I agree," she whispered. Rowena nodded once. "Mrs. Blackwood will show you out." She did not watch her mother leave. Only when the door closed did her strength finally fade. Ambrose found her an hour later, sitting silently by the window. He did not ask questions. He simply wrapped his arms around her and held her until the tears finally came. "You were merciful," he said quietly afterward. "I was fair," she replied, "and I refused to become her." He kissed her hair. "That is why I love you." Spring arrived slowly at Dunor Park, and with it came something unexpected. One morning, while reviewing household accounts, Rowena suddenly felt the room tilt. She barely caught the desk before darkness swept over her. When she woke, Ambrose sat beside the bed. His face looked pale with worry. "What happened?" she whispered. "You fainted. The doctor is on his way." Minutes later, the physician finished his examination with a wide smile. "Your Grace," he said to Ambrose, "there is nothing wrong with the Duchess." He turned toward Rowena. "In fact, she is in excellent health." The pause stretched. "She is also with child." The word seemed unreal. Rowena stared at him. "A child?" Ambrose's breath left him slowly. "Our child," he whispered. Joy filled the room so suddenly it felt almost overwhelming. He pulled her into his arms, laughing and half crying at once. Later that night, Rowena stood in the nursery window with his arms around her. "I will never let our child believe they are worthless," she said quietly. "They will know they are loved." Ambrose kissed her temple. "They will know because their mother knows." Years later, Dunor Park would echo with laughter. Children running through long halls, a daughter with brown hair and storm-gray eyes, then a son, then another daughter, and sometimes, on quiet evenings beside the fire, Rowena would catch her husband watching her the same way he had the night he lifted her veil. "What are you thinking?" she would ask. He would smile slowly. "That the luckiest moment of my life was when your sister ran away." Rowena would laugh softly. "And the bravest moment of mine," she would reply, "was walking down that aisle, because the girl who had been sold beneath a veil had believed she was nothing. But the woman who became Duchess of Dunor had discovered something far greater. She had never been invisible, only unseen, until the one man who had been watching all along